Mathew Mozzoni. You were just listening to a track I wrote using Kinder Klang, a new contact instrument from Triumph Audio. This is a super fun instrument. It's got ukuleles and zithers and all sorts of percussion, everything from kitchen pots and pans to udus and all sorts of different things. So it's got a lot of attitude. This track is about 99% Kinder Klang. So as we go through it, we're going to hear all sorts of different patches and samples from the library, which is such a blast to use. We'll let the track play in full at the end of the video if you want to check that out. So let's jump over to Cubase and we'll get into it. Okay, so here's my Cubase session for the track. So just really quickly, overall, my main sort of idea for this track was when I was listening to all the Kinder Klang patches and instruments and such, it really had such personality and it was so whimsical. I immediately started getting this sort of, this idea in my mind of like whimsical, sort of fun, wholesome children's TV shows like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time and even stuff like Bluey. And so that's sort of the idea behind this track. I really wanted to find a way to feature all these cool sounds in this library. So let's check it out. So let's take a look at the intro. Let's just listen to that real quick. So what we're hearing there's a combination of really cool sounds. The first one we'll take a look at is this gliss marimba. Let's take a listen to that. That's a patch within Kinder Klang. Let's take a listen. All sorts of different glisses. And what's cool is you can transpose them. So if you need them in a different key, you can do so. And you'll find that I use that function a lot between all these different patches. So what else do we have in the intro? We've got this really cool power tool riser. This is, you'll see I bounce to audio a lot. That's just so that I kind of know how the sample is going to act, and I can make decisions based off of that. What you're hearing there is a patch within Kinder Klang that is just a bunch of sampled tools and sort of workshop tools. And I found this really cool kind of power tool sound that I thought would make a great riser. And I just automated the cutoff of a filter and just faded the volume in there. And it gives a nice, addition to the intro there to help it feel like you're kind of whooshing and transitioning into the that first A section there. Another thing we're hearing, this is really cool. So there's a toddler drum kit patch. And here I just took one of the cymbal hits from that patch and I reversed it. So you're going to hear this. And it basically acts like a little cymbal riser or white noise riser. Another cool aspect of this intro are these sort of shaker and tambourine transition-y kind of swells that I got from the percussion toy menus. So let's take a listen to those together. It's really cool. You can tell they were performed, in a way that they could be used together. And they just help sort of transition. You'll see I use those throughout the track to help with any sort of transitions. Those are really cool. All right, so getting into this first A section here, we jump right into the melody. For a TV show theme, I wanted to keep it really tight, so we just start right on the melody, right after that really short intro. So that melody, let's take a listen to what's playing that melody there. So what we've got there, we've got a zither, which is a really nice sound in this library. Let's take a listen to that. Just the kalimba, lap harp, toy piano, marimba. So all together, we've got this melody that I chose instruments that have a lot of attack, but not a lot of sustain. They kind of die immediately. If you're composing a track where you feel like you need some contrast between the different sections, try experimenting with that. You can have a melody that's really plucky and doesn't have a lot of sustain in one section. And then in the next section, as you'll hear on the bridge, there's a lot of sustain, maybe not as much attack. And it creates a really nice contrast between those two different sections. So moving on here, let's take a listen to the bass. So I'm using two different instruments to create this bass sound. The first is this melodica bass. Let's listen to that on its own. super quirky. I love it. Let's take a look at how I'm doing that. So I'm using the transpose function, which is really cool because it gives a lot of versatility to these patches. You could pitch shift this thing up and get some really nice high sounds for a melody, or you could pitch it down and, get a bass sound. And so that gives us this sort of quirky sort of bass, and we're doing that sort of root and fifth kind of oompa sort of bass style there. The other sound we've got on the bass there is this really cool boomwhacker bass. And on this one, I'm also using the tune function in the Triumph engine. So check this out. It's really helpful for if you need some extra pitch shifting capabilities. And together those sound. It gives a little bit more attack to that bass sound, and it gives it a little bit more fullness, a little bit more depth. And they sound really nice in the track. So it's sort of an alternative to just using like a bass synth or a bass guitar sound. They work really well together. So let's take a listen to these ukulele strums. It's one of my favorite patches in this library, but I'm a little biased because this is me playing. We sampled my ukulele here. So this is a really helpful patch because we not only sampled every single major and minor chord, but we also got down strums and up strums for each chord and about 6 velocity layers, I believe. And so this is really helpful in creating like a really realistic strumming sound on the ukulele, because that's a big part of getting that sound is the down strums and the up strums. And when you combine those, it really kind of helps sell the realism of it. And so if you listen to the ukulele, really helps it sound realistic to have those down strums and up strums. So you may have noticed I have a folder here called Fun Stuff. And this is where I put a lot of these really kind of fun sounds. So something you'll notice in the sort of gaps of the melody in this track is I try to use a lot of these sounds to kind of create some fun, almost sort of counterline sounds. Let's take a listen to that. So right there, that comes from the Kitchen Hits patch, which is a really fun patch. It's a bunch of sampled stuff from a kitchen. And I use that a couple times. As a composer, you're always looking for stuff to, maybe it's a delay throw or a reverb throw, or maybe it's a counter line on another instrument. But sometimes I think it's fun to just use a sound that just kind of comes in for a second, and I thought that was a fun way to feature some really cool sounds from this library. Let's listen to a couple more here. So this is a train whistle, which I think is really fun because it helps transition us into the next A section. Let's listen to that. So that train whistle sound, that's 2 different samples here in the Toy Junk percussion menu. What's cool about that is if you listen, the bass cuts out right there on that second whistle sound. And it's a way to sort of feature that sound and give some attention and focus there, but also pulling the bass out there. When the bass comes back in on the next A section, it feels like an arrival point. It feels like it's getting, more intense. And it just kind of helps shape the track. It gives it some sort of shading and shape. So let's take a look at this second A section and see what we do to sort of make this a little bit different than the first A section. Again, I'm using that cymbal, that reversed toddler cymbal, to get us into that next section. Let's take a look at what we've added in this section here. So as we get into the second A section, we have these really fun kazoo sounds, which we can listen to here. There's a bunch of these kazoo patches. These are the male sustains, and then I believe here we'll have the female sustains. Together, they create these chord pads that are really help fill out the texture, but they're also really fun and add to that sort of whimsicality and an overall vibe of the track. And I believe I pan these left and right to just help with getting some stereo width. We also add this tiny glock to the melody, which just helps give it some more brightness, so it's a little bit more intense. Let's listen to just the glock. And so this transition to the bridge, we're using these chimes. Let's take a listen to those. I'm automating the panning there so it just feels like the player is playing from, left to right on a set of chimes. We also get this udo reverse. Sometimes I'll bounce that first hit to audio and reverse it, maybe do some pitch shifting or other things to it so that it kind of preempts that sound a little bit so it's not just starting so abruptly. Let's listen to those together. Let's take a listen to the bridge as a whole, and then we can kind of break apart what's going on there. Okay, so this bridge melody is really fun. Let's take a listen to that. So our sort of main character here is this Otamatone. It sounds almost like an opera singer. Let's listen to that just on its own. I like that patch because it seems a little bit, dramatic and over the top, which is how I wanted this bridge to sound. And like I said before, this melody is supposed to be sort of long and sustaining, which is really contrasts well with the A section melodies, so that when you go back to that melody after this section, and when you come to this section from that melody, it feels like a really nice change of pace. The other instruments we have on the melody here are the ocarina, and we've got the recorder. And you'll notice I've got a lot of muted sections in this track. I oftentimes will try out different melodies and different sections on different instruments. And if those don't end up working out, I just mute them rather than delete them, because as you'll see down here, like in the intro, you're going to hear this counting later. I tried it on the intro. I didn't really like it there, but I just muted it rather than deleting it because, you may have a client who says, can we add something to that intro? Or I don't like that counting sound you have before we go back into that last A section. Can we put that somewhere else? Or you can go back and maybe try it in that intro. It's sort of a visual reminder that you had an idea to put it there. And so I just mute it rather than actually delete it. I really like the percussion on the bridge. I add this udo as sort of like it's a lower drum, not quite like a kick drum, but it almost takes the place of the bass because we lose the bass for a minute. Let's listen to just the percussion on its own. Okay, so something else about the percussion on this bridge is I've got this reverberant snare sound, which just helps fill out the arrangement a little bit, I think. And so there's some reverb on there, some filters and EQ, but this is just coming from the kitchen pot hits patch. And it sounds like a great little white noise snare, a little kind of noise layer. Again, this library is super, super versatile. So another fun part of this bridge are these bugle sounds that we get. There's several different bugle patches in this library, and they all sound great. They have that sort of personality to them. And they're really great for chord pads. I'm almost using them in the same way as I was using those kazoos in the second A section. They just help fill out the chords and the arrangement, but they've got more personality than just like maybe a synth pad or some strings or something. So let's listen to just the bugles. Those bugles are playing the chords. You'll notice that I've got this chord track up here. I'm a huge believer in the chord track in Cubase. I love using it. It helps me orient myself and where I am at in the track, or if I'm recording on a real instrument, I can look up and use that as a way to keep my place, or maybe have ideas for the arrangement, or as I'm voicing out things, I can look up there and see what I'm doing. You can always select the chord. If you hold Alt and drag down, you've got a voicing, and you can change how you want the chord to be voiced in the settings over here. Super useful having the chord track. I'm also adding this low toy piano on the bridge. Let's listen to that. That's just arpeggiating the chords. Again, I'm using the transpose function. That's a lot lower than this patch normally is. It usually starts out up here. And again, that's my toy piano that I've got here. It's a broken toy piano, and we still were able to get a lot of usable sounds out of it. It's a really great kind of warbly, janky toy piano sound. But we've got it down here. We don't have any bass happening at this point, so it's just something to help fill out that lower end of the arrangement, and it's a sort of quirky sound. So let's take a listen to this transition back into the last A section. So there's a couple things happening there. So I really like this lap steel patch that we've got in the library. Let's listen to just that patch. Really cool. It's a it's a crazy sound. It's awesome. And it's really usable for these transitions, or if you needed a little stinger. It almost reminds me of Psychonauts, or some kind of children's TV show where you just need a little stinger when a character does something crazy, or when you're coming back from commercial or whatever. Another thing we're using to help us transition between these two sections are these slide whistle sounds. Super silly, and they're really great for transitions because they have that sort of riser, downer, glissando kind of sound to them. Awesome. We can even check out, so this is a slide whistle downs menu. So this is all the slide whistle sounds going down. So you've got a bunch of different options there, and again, you can transpose it, or you can also use the Triumph engine with effects and sequencers and all sorts of stuff that you can use to get even more mileage out of these samples. Something else that's fun about this transition is we're using the Toddler drum kit to play these sort of big tom fills, which are really fun. Let's listen to that. It makes me think of like baby Phil Collins playing this cute little fill here. Now, a super fun part of this transition are these counting vocal samples. Let's listen to those.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So those are actually my girlfriend. We sampled her right here in this room. I had her do all sorts of crazy stuff like this counting, or we had her say some things as if she was a teacher, and had her do all sorts of like onomatopoeia, sort of vocal sound effects and stuff. And so I pitched those up, and I did all sorts of stuff to them so they can help in a transition like this, because it's like, gives your ear something to listen to that's not a melody, but it's still sort of a focal point of that section.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so this last A section here, it's a little bit kind of a middle ground between the first and the second A section. It's a little bit stripped down. We don't have the clapping or the kazoos. Let's listen to the final A section as a whole.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We do add this trumpet and trombone sound. The trombone is not actually a trombone. We're using the trumpet, but pitched down. Let's listen to just those two on their own. And then right here at the tail end, I have that trombone coming in and just sort of helping, shade the end of that line, and then play this little outro riff, this So you'll hear in between the melody there, we've got these cowbell sounds. They're actually called baby cowbells. Check these out. Cute little bell sounds that you can use as a transition, or I'm using them here as sort of more of a focal point, like little counter line sort of thing. So those are super cool. And then we've got our outro here. Let's listen to that. So we've got this little melody there, which uses a lot of the same instruments as our A section melody. And something to note, just compositionally, if you're going to bring in a new melody or something, it's often helpful to bring it in a little bit early before it actually starts. So just that one extra note helps it feel like it's not so abrupt. That just one note early. Not all the instruments have that extra note, so that when you get to that next section, there's still one more thing comes in, so it does feel a little bit new and not like everything started there. So it's just finding different ways of shading these different sections and transitions and all that kind of stuff. So you'll hear the kazoos come back there at the end. We get more of that gliss marimba. We also get that power tool riser that comes back. The toddler cymbals. My first instinct as a composer, when I heard that trumpet note ringing out there at the end, was to blend it with everything else and shorten it. But, it's something helpful to think about is always just remembering like what it is you're writing, remembering the thing of what you're writing. And so this is supposed to be whimsical and silly. And I think letting that trumpet note ring out at the end there, it gives that ending a little bit of a moment, and You can put like a little tag there as that maybe the title of the show is on the screen, or the main character kind of, does something funny or quirky, but it just gives the ending a little bit of an identity there. So sometimes it's best to kind of just think about, okay, what is this track that I'm actually writing, All right, so that's the track. It's a really fun piece of music, which makes sense because it's a really fun library. And when you start going through all the sounds, you just get a smile on your face. This library has a lot of personality, but I think it's still so versatile, which is a really hard balance to strike. So I'm really excited for people to get their hands on this instrument and really see what people make with it. So go to triumphaudio.com to check out the instrument. Go to my website, mathewmozzoni.com, to listen to more of my music. And we'll play the track in full now. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.